Hi, everyone. My name is Cassandra Cavness, and I am the Development Assistant for the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts. Tonight, we are hosting Creative Conversations with Bill Ford. We are going to discuss our outdoor exhibit, Voices of Change. But before we get into that, and before Bill introduces himself, we have a short clip that I'd like to play for you tonight.
A world laid low by a nefarious pandemic, climate change is exacerbated by callousness and greed, and a lack of integrity and moral fiber in world leadership, there is no better time for Voices of Change. The collection of evocative, majestic photographic portraits by the incomparable Yusuf Karsh. These 10 women and men represent traits that we should all aspire to emulate: audacity, creativity, dedication, empathy, verve, selflessness, humor, and probably most important, the courage to speak out.
Now, those are some powerful words, Bill, and I think they're really poignant and I think they're really relevant to this exhibition. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with this exhibition?
Well, my name is Bill Ford, as you said. I'm a lifelong resident of Montgomery. For the most part, I've spent a little time away, but my roots are so strong here, and my family means so much to me that I've never spent more than a couple of years away from home before moving back. And after the last time I left and moved back, I started a career in broadcasting, and it spanned 30 years before I looked up. I spent all 30 of those years here at WSFA, Channel 12, uh, 22 years as the art director. And my time here in Montgomery, being here in Montgomery all this time and being the son of an artist, he sort of, my dad was on the City Arts Council, and after he had been on there for probably a decade or close to it, he told me, he said, "Son, I'm retiring from the City Arts Council, and you should get on. You should take my place." And I think my father was, in a way, pushing me to become involved in not just art and but just involved in events in the city, because up until that time I had been rather non-committal. Um, I'm embarrassed to say it now. I used to be one of those people who didn't think voting was relevant. I didn't register to vote until I think I was 30 years old. I registered to vote against against Ronald Reagan, if my memory serves me correct, or somebody like that. But you know, when you guys invited me to take a part in this exhibit, I reviewed the photographs, and of course it was just so obvious to me that all of the people in the exhibit were people that had impacted me in my development, um, and some more directly than others, but they all had an impact and they all existed in my consciousness. And so I was only too glad to get involved and to place some perspective on these people. And of course, being an elder statesman myself now, I guess that does make me a perfect person to comment on all these people, because I was around when they were all alive. I've been around since they all existed, so I had a firsthand knowledge of all of them. So it was just a real pleasure for me to get involved in this, and I was honored and privileged, because I think the work that the museum does is so vital. I'm a big fan of art in our society. I tell people all the time, art is what civilizes man. I think too often, and I'm a big sports fan myself, and I love football and basketball, and I love to go fishing. But to me, if you follow anthropology or even archaeology, what they dig up years from now, they don't dig up footballs or rubber balls or anything like that. They dig up objet d'art, they dig up objects of art and sculptures and paintings, and that's the kind of stuff that tells you what a civilization was all about. So I just love to promote the arts, and anytime I can be involved in something in MMFA, I'm right there.
Well, we definitely appreciate everything that you do for us, Bill. We really do. We love to collaborate with you on, a variety of different programs and initiatives at our museum. This particular exhibition, I think, is really neat because it was conceptualized kind of shortly after the incident, the murder of George Floyd. And our staff were trying to figure out a way to talk about not letting your voice be silent, right? How can we say that? How can we show that? And also during a time of pandemic when people, well, first of all, we were closed during this time, so we weren't even open to the public. And we knew that when this exhibition was going to go up, that people still probably weren't going to be comfortable coming inside, right? Mm-hmm. So we had to think kind of creatively, how are we going to get this message across? So it was very cross-departmental. We worked, PR and marketing, development, curatorial education. We all kind of came together and said, well, we have these amazing photographs from Yusuf Karsh, and they all are depicting people in society that lent their voice to different movements, right? And we kind of went through and we decided to pick, I think 10 of them. And we were really happy with the ones that we selected. The next part was, how do we display them, right? Where are we going to put them? And so we decided the best place would be an outdoor venue. And so this is kind of our first foray into outdoor exhibitions. And we're going to continue this. So this exhibition, called Voices of Change, is currently an outdoor exhibition, like I said, and it's around the green space outside of our building. And so you never have to come inside our building if you don't want to view the entire exhibition. And it allows you to go from portrait to portrait, from photograph to photograph, without feeling uncomfortable, because there's enough space in between to give people room to kind of sit and contemplate and think along the path to the next one. But also you can see far enough away that if you still feel a little uncomfortable being next to people, that you can see that next person, and you can kind of either go around them or you can, stand next to them if it makes it, if it's comfortable for you. But what I think is even more important than that is that we were able to get you to kind of create this walking audio tour narration of these photographs. And not only do we get to hear your thoughts and your insights on the people that are on display, but we also have reflections written by MMFA staff that are right next to the photographs. So I think this is really a multi-layered display that gives a lot of information in a lot of different ways, so people can really experience it at whatever point they're coming at, right? Whatever level of information and knowledge that they have, they can gain something from this exhibition. So let's talk a little bit about some of the people that you'll see if you walk the exhibition. So the first one up is Joan Baez. So she is a musician, and she is someone who has never shied away from using her platform and her artistry to help give voice to a cause, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about what you remember about her and her presence here in Montgomery?
Yeah, well, she came into prominence in the early 60s as one of the original folk singers. And I recall her, of course, her name was so unusual, and this was really at the it was at the beginning when you had female singer-songwriters like Laura Nero and uh, King. What was her first name? Carole King, Laura Nero, people like that. And Joan Baez was one of them. And she played the acoustic guitar. And then I think at one point early in her career, I know she was a collaborator, but I even think she was a consort for a while with Bob Dylan. And that's when she was kind of thrust into my consciousness. And she famously covered "We Shall Overcome," which was really powerful in those days. You know, that was the anthem for the movement. And so in 1965, when when the marchers came from Selma to Montgomery, that third march led by Martin Luther King, she was one of the marchers. She took part in the Selma to Montgomery march, and the night they came to Montgomery, they had entertainment for all of the marchers, because the city of Montgomery would not allow the marchers to assemble en masse anywhere on public property. And the only venue, the only place privately within the city limits that was large enough to accommodate that many people was the city of St. Jude's, and it's 39 some odd acres, I think. And they had people like Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter, Paul, and Mary and Joan Baez and you know, Tony Curtis and just all kind of luminaries there to entertain and perform for the marchers. And so that was just a very powerful statement. And she was one of the really young women who were and dare I say young white women who were really at the forefront of speaking out, supporting the civil rights movement, and using her platform in a way that of course her voice was amplified, because she was at that time. Carole King was known as a songwriter, and she even, her first album produced a bunch of hits, but at that time, Joan Baez was probably the preeminent female singer-songwriter on the pop scene. And so she was just and is still doing the same thing today. That's what's so amazing about her. I think she's now working on her 6th decade, using her voice as a platform for speaking out against people who have been unjustly treated around the world, not just in the United States.
Yeah, I think that her constant use of her artistry is amazing. There's a lot of people that use their platform for one or two different things that occur because it happens to,
Right.
resonate with them.
Right.
But I mean, she has just used her entire career to do that. She participated in the free speech movement at UC Berkeley. She co-founded the Institute for the Study of Nonviolence in, Carmel Valley. She stood along Cesar Chavez. She's done all these things. She even went to North Ireland, right? So there's all these different things that she did that allowed people who might not even have known what was going on or been paying attention to what was going on, but they listened to her music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's amazing how artists are able to use that platform to help kind of garner people into the fold, so to speak, to create awareness, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, Bill. How do you as an artist kind of do that? How do you help create awareness of a movement or of an issue?
Well, one thing that I try to do is I try to, it's always been important to me. My father was a man who embraced all kinds of genres of music and art and entertainment and literature, and he passed that along to me. And my mother was pretty much from the same mold. You know, growing up in the household, we listened to jazz, we listened to blues, we listened to R&B, we listened to rock and roll. So I grew up with an understanding and an appreciation for all kind of cultural expression and cultural artistic expression. And so I bring that along with me whenever I, like at my 30-year career at WSFA, I had friends from almost every political perspective, economic niche, uh, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, because I just think that if we all sit down with each other and have conversations, we find out that we are more alike than we are different. And so I was telling somebody the other day, I remember first grade at St. Jude's, they gave us these rulers, this is 12-inch ruler. And on the back it said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the golden rule. And that just 5 years old, that hit me like a ton of bricks, because to me it was such a simple yet very sensible. I mean, if you can't wrap your mind around that, just treat people the way you want to be treated. I mean, that's pretty simple to me. And so as an artist, I try to first of all reach out my hand and friendship. You can disarm people just by being friendly, just by being nice. I mean, I extend the hand of friendship to anybody that will extend it to me. Now, if I get rebuffed, or if I'm rejected at some point, then I'm not gonna be a martyr to that position. But that's at least the approach that I use initially. And so I try as an artist to look at all perspectives and understand that, even with literature. I mean, I read literature that some people might think is a bit odd for a person from my cultural background or ethnicity. When I was in elementary school, my favorite teacher gave me a copy of Lord of the Rings when I was in 8th grade. She said, "William, I think you'll like this," because I was such a big fan of Arthurian literature by King Arthur. I loved chivalry and all those things that spoke to the grandness or the higher ideals of humanity, whether it be chivalry or bravery or selflessness, all those kind of things. And that's ultimately is, I think, what we should all aspire to do. Um, and so those are the kind of ideals that I think as an artist you should promote. And truth. You have to be truthful. You have to assess a situation and think about it, and truth usually is very apparent if you really pay attention and do your homework and take the time to learn all facets of a problem. The right course of action is usually pretty obvious in retrospect, and even when you assess it, so that's what that's what I do as an artist. I don't take a knee-jerk reaction to everything. I always try to put myself in the other person's shoes and think about that lesson I got in the 1st grade. If this was me, how would I want people to treat me in this situation? And so that's the position that I usually adopt whenever I'm approaching anything.
I think that idea of telling the truth
Mm.
is really powerful. And I feel that artists, no matter, what form that takes, whether it's performing arts, visual arts, literature, whatever, if you're creating something for the public or even for yourself, I feel like there's an element of truth to it, right? There is something that you're trying to get across. There's a point you're trying to say, right? And I kind of feel that is exactly how Yusuf Karsh did these photographs. Like, he's trying to bring the truth of these people, right? The essence of these people alive in these photographs.
Right. Now, that's one of the things that I really, that resonates with me about photography, is that photography, for its first decades after it coming into existence, there was a resistance from people to place photography in as an art form, because a lot of people, anybody can take a picture. That's not an art form. But no, it's ridiculous to suggest otherwise, especially when you look at Yusuf Karsh's and many other renowned photographers' work. I mean, there is a difference between Joe Blow picking up a camera and taking a picture and somebody like Yusuf Karsh taking a picture, or whoever the photographer might be, Helmut Lang or anybody. You just it jumps off the page. And so his pictures, his photographs are, and for most of them being black and white too, that's really, it shows just how much the composition, the lighting, and just, you're right. The truth of that person's character is shining through in almost all these photographs.
I think it's amazing how an image can really capture a moment in time or a person's thoughtfulness or a person's consciousness, really, right? It's one of those special kind of views into someone's mind, or sometimes into their soul or their beliefs, right? In that moment in time when you capture that photograph. And I think for me, what's so great about it is that once you've captured that moment, it's there for generations to look at.
Frozen in time. Right. Frozen in time. And that's, I often think of, Native Americans had a prohibition for having their images captured on film at first. They felt like it was, you would steal part of their soul. And sometimes when you look at these images, you can understand what they mean. I mean, that picture of Joan Baez is particularly arresting. I mean, and then so simple, but yet it's extremely moving and powerful. I bet she looks at that photograph now and just goes, "Look at me." Look at me.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, and the way in which Yusuf Karsh was able to capture kind of a person's essence or thoughts, right? So in the narration that you give on Bishop Desmond Tutu, you say that he is said to be an apt mimic and notable for his humor. He navigated the dangerous policies of South Africa with wit and wisdom, often quoting his father, "Don't raise your voice, improve your argument."
Yeah.
And I feel like he's saying that in this photograph.
No, absolutely. I mean, you could look at that picture and think you're looking at a stand-up comedian. He could be a stand-up comedian. He looks like he could be a kind of a Robin Harris kind of guy, or somebody like that, because he's got that wit is so apparent. I mean, you can see the twinkle in his eye, and with him and being a cleric, and then the way he was able to affect so much change in South Africa, I think it's really obvious that he used his wit to disarm his foes. I'm sure that was one of his most powerful weapons in changing hearts and minds in South Africa. Because if people smile when they see you, they're much more likely to accommodate you. That's, being pleasant can go a long way.
Yeah, what's that saying? You catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar?
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in that, and then, like I said, I typically would being a person that I pride myself on absorbing a bunch of different information from different sources. And so when I sit down with a person, sometimes they're surprised that I may know something about their culture or something about their circumstances or something about their point of view that they would not have expected me to know. And so I do that to show them that, hey, I mean, there are no stereotypes. Stereotypes exist for a reason, but they're lazy.
Yeah.
They're lazy. You get, of course, stereotypes, some stereotypes have a basis in fact, but then you can't ascribe that to everybody because there are exceptions to every rule. And then the stereotypes sometimes can hide a deeper understanding or deeper perspective. But if you just ascribe to the stereotype, I mean, like even myself, for years and years, I was a pretty buttoned down guy. I wore glasses and I had a pretty preppy look and but then I started letting my hair grow. I was fascinated with Rastafarians from the first time seeing some in a National Geographic. So I started growing my hair, and it was just amazing to me that quite often the people who would take the most stereotypical perspective on my hair were my own people, Black people. It always surprised me. When this one guy said, I just assumed he was a thug. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But that's stereotypes. They have a broad application, but you can't use that broad brush to paint everybody. So, yeah, Desmond Tutu is somebody that clearly it had such a profound effect on world politics, and I didn't see, to be honest with you, I didn't see how anybody could extricate South Africa from that morass that had existed for so many years. But Desmond Tutu almost single-handedly, of course, with some other people, but he went a long way in really disarming the people of South Africa and pointing out to them again the truth of how what was going on there was so egregious. And you have to give it to Karsh, man. I mean, and part of being a great photographer, and I know I always, when I was at the station at one point, I was not really the station photographer, but I kind of ended up in that position. I took everybody's ID pictures, and then being over the art department, I eventually moved into taking photographs of our talent on set and some stuff. And being a great photographer, a lot of times is being able to make your subject relaxed, make your subject comfortable. Because most people, when they see a camera, they tense up and they start behaving unnaturally. But a good photographer can make people relax and be themselves. And that's when the essence of who that person is comes out on in a print, So Karsh was clearly a master of that.
I definitely agree with that. And going back to your point of Bishop Desmond Tutu being able to talk about the truth of the matter, right, and get to the heart of the matter. It's interesting that we often phrase it like that when, in 1995, he was appointed the head of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa. And so it's interesting that we say truth in so many different ways and dealing with so many different avenues and aspects of life, right? But if we think about it, they all converge, they all come together because in the end, they're all trying to tell the same story, right?
Yep. Well, I don't want to get too political here, but that was, to me, was one of the real signposts, so to speak, when you assess you know, the last 4 years. I mean, when people start talking about alternative facts, and like there was an alternative truth, my best friend's mother used to always say, the truth doesn't take a side. The truth is the truth. And you might try to shade the truth, or you might try to obscure the truth, but usually the truth manifests itself in the end. It's going to come out in the end. Like I said, it might not come out in the wash, but it's going to come out in the rinse. So, so that's kind of what 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 I think all social activism and is based on people telling the truth about something, and injustice. It's an injustice, and all these people, uh, so often now, and that always astounds me, how sometimes people, depending on their political affiliation or their ideology, will speak about artists and entertainers and athletes. Like an artist, just sing your music, or an athlete, just dribble the ball, or but then, some of the most powerful people in our society have always been artists and actors and entertainers, uh, and they've been elected and sent to Congress. I mean, one of the first populist uh, people to be sent to Congress in the United States was it Daniel Boone and David Crockett? One of the two of them was sent to Congress. I think it was Daniel Boone, but he was a populist. He was a popular figure, and so we've sent popular people to Congress, and heck, Ronald Reagan, the actor, ended up being the president. So I think actors and artists, and in some broader sense, entertainers, because we are in a field where the truth is important, speaking the truth, addressing the truth, bringing out the truth, then it kind of lends itself to a political perspective. And I typically, point out that, a lot of people, good and bad, have been actors and artists. And heck, what was the one of the recently, the entertainer I think the guy that was that our president was trying to strong arm, do me a deal. He was a stand-up comedian, and George W. Bush is a painter. Heck, Adolf Hitler was a painter. So, sometimes the pursuit of art, it can be agonizing. It can be revealing. It can reveal your inner turmoil, and sometimes your tortured psyche, even. So I think art lends itself to social activism and expressing yourself, because generally, if you're going to express yourself, it's something that you feel strongly about. One of the greatest works of political expression, again, is Guernica. Picasso's Guernica. That's a powerful, powerful piece about the evils of war. So I think that, again, these I was only so glad to be able to lend my voice to this exhibit, and while I'm on it, I love the fact that it's outdoors, because the grounds of the museum are so beautiful with the lake. And I think too often people go to the museum, get out of their cars in the parking lot, and go in, come back out, get in their cars, and go home. You know, when actually the grounds of the museum are really wonderful. A lot of people take advantage of it, and the sculpture garden, I think, is another prime example of utilizing the outdoor space. But this particular exhibit, as you said, the way that they're spaced apart and you get to walk from one station to the other one, it's a beautiful venue, and I think it's a wonderful exhibit.
What I love about it being outside is that, to me, a lot of these people that we are showcasing in the exhibit are grappling with a lot of heavy issues, right? So
Mhm.
to be able to be outside and to kind of be in touch with nature and grounded allows that space for reflection. It
Right.
allows that space for kind of communing with just your environment and
Yes.
thinking about things in a little bit more of a broader context and not feeling so rushed to, get down the hallway because somebody else is coming or whatever.
Mhm.
I love that we put this outside to allow people that space to
Oh
be.
yeah, and especially now. That's you're right. I mean, it would be a great exhibit even in the best of times, but especially now with what we're going through and everybody spending more time. I after growing up, my godfather used to take me fishing with him, and then he died, and I didn't fish for like 30 years, and I recently took fishing up. And the thing I tell people when I go fishing, they'll say, "Did you catch anything?" And I'm going, I enjoy myself when I go fishing, whether I catch something or not. Because just being outside and communing with nature and being out by a body of water and being able to smell the flowers and hear the birds and one of the first things I do when I go fishing is I pull my shoes off so I can start grounding, as they say, because they say we walk on too much concrete and in paved surfaces. And if you pull your shoes off and actually walk around in the grass and on the ground, you realign the ions in your body. It's oriented to the ions in the earth, and it's just called grounding. It brings your blood pressure down. So uh, as it warms up a bit, people, when you go out there and look at this exhibit, pull your shoes off and walk from station to station, and watch your blood pressure go down, and read the comments and listen to the commentary. It'll be quite a relaxing experience.
I agree. One of the things that I want to kind of talk a little bit more about is this idea that Desmond Tutu had, don't raise your voice, improve your argument. To me, that is so apt to what is happening in the world today, right? There are so many issues out there, whether we're talking about LGBTQ issues or we're talking about Black Lives Matter issues, or we're talking about people with disability trying to break into more realms. And I often, when you watch the news or you watch, read an article or something, it's often the person who is speaking the loudest that they kind of put in the forefront.
Yeah.
But it's like Desmond Tutu says, that's not necessarily the best approach. We need to think more strategically, right? And I think that's one of the things that is amazing about these artist movements that are kind of going on right now is that, it allows people to think strategically. And like you said before, not be reactionary, right? Not get out there because there's something that makes you angry. It's like, no, let's take a beat, let's take a minute, let's think about it. How are we going to respond? And I really love that. To me, it seems like Yusuf Karsh was able to kind of capture that essence in this photograph. Like you could see Bishop Desmond Tutu saying that through this photograph, thinking that through this photograph.
Right.
I think that's what's amazing.
I don't think I've ever heard Desmond Tutu speak above a conversational tone. I can't even recall him shouting or raising his voice. I'm sure he's been indignant before, but I've never seen it expressed. I remember coming up, there was a saying some of my friends, it was always funny when somebody would be expressing themselves in a real vociferous way, and then when it became obvious that the person didn't know what they were talking about, or they would stumble across, one of the other people in the group would say loud and somebody else would say and wrong, so it was kind of like that's a double sin. Not only were you loud, but you were wrong. So that's that's a good way to look at it. I mean, yeah, you can't, that old saying about, when you come across two people arguing, it's kind of hard to tell which one of them is the fool. Two people arguing loudly, it's hard to tell which one of them is the fool because they're both arguing loudly. And typically, when you get to that point, you let your emotions get the best of you, and you're not reasoning. You're not, that's like in a good debate. In a good debate, and if you're on a debating team, you're supposed to hone your argument and speak in a persuasive way, but that's not always the person that's talking the loudest. So
That's true.
yeah.
Going back to one of the things you said earlier about how that ruler kind of stuck with you and the golden rule and treating people how you want to be treated. Albert Schweitzer, he had a philosophy called reverence for life.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that's the same thing, right? It's like treat everybody as a human being, like make sure that people, that you're seeing people, right? You're not seeing numbers, you're not
Right.
seeing dollar signs, you're seeing people.
You're seeing people. Exactly. Albert Schweitzer, it was kind of funny because he was one of the people who kind of had occupied kind of a nebulous space for me when I was young, because at one point I used to get Albert Schweitzer and Albert Einstein mixed up. It was something about the hair, and they both won Nobel Prizes, and they were both musicians. It kind of became a conglomerate person, and it took me a while to go, oh no, those are two different people. One's a doctor and a philanthropist and a theologian, and the other one is a theoretical physicist. So I kind of know how that happened, but Albert Schweitzer was just a person who really kind of embodied that reverence for all things, and that's something that I've found that people who love animals typically can find it easy to love people too. If you get to the point where you revere all living things, whether it be plants or animals, and in people, you start seeing all of us as a creation, part of God's creation, and you have a reverence for life. That sort of carries over from one species to the next, And I think as we become more enlightened as a society, especially when you see people getting to the point now where a lot of people don't eat meat because they think of the cruelty to animals, and they don't wear leather, and because people are treating animals in a much more humane way than they used to when I was coming up. When I was coming up, people would just, tortured animals, dogs, cats, hit them in the streets and those kind of things. But now people, it's kind of kind of interesting to see. When I was growing up and we had dogs and cats, people used to joke that your dog, you fed them table scraps and that kind of thing. And if they got sick, it was like, okay, well, unfortunately, that's the end of you, buddy. But now people spend thousands of dollars on their animals and their health care, and we treat them like members of the family. And that shows to me that our society is becoming more enlightened. We're becoming more humane. And I think that as we become more humane and have compassion and empathy and reverence for what we call the lower animals, then that can't help but extend to the human man, humanity. Because if you're going to have that much reverence for, whether it be a beetle or a small fish that they're stopping people from damming a lake because it's going to have a negative impact on a fish the size of your thumb. Well, that to me is a sign of progress. And people like Albert Schweitzer, he was really an early proponent of that kind of thing, and having reverence for all living things and people. So
what is great about this photograph to me is that it embodies all three of kind of sides that we know about him, right? Like, if you looked at this, you would think, I could see a doctor, right?
Mhm.
Or you look at it and you go, oh, I could see a priest.
Yep.
Or you look at it and you go, I could see a musician.
Yep.
So to me, it's like amazing that he was able to get all three of those different aspects of his life to kind of come together and be seen as this one photograph. But it's not just one element, right? It's like all of his life, everything that he does, you can kind of see in this photograph. And I think that to be able to capture something like that is truly astounding to me. But I also think it speaks to the art form.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. And the thing that, the word he's so pensive in this photograph, there's no telling what he's thinking about. But you're right. He could be thinking about a particular difficult passage in a piece of music. He could be thinking about a delicate operation or a person with an illness, and he's trying to figure out what's making that person ill. Or he could be, really trying to decide some great theological question and debate. Because I think one of the things now when we have so much friction between denominations and sects, I just think it's important to understand that, we're all God's creatures. And I try, even though I was raised I was born in the AME church, African Methodist Episcopal, and then I converted to Catholicism. And then I for many years I embraced the Taoist philosophy, and so for me, I try to get down to the essence of religions, and not spend so much time thinking about the prophet so much as the message that the prophet gave, because typically if you boil the message down, the message tends to be universal because the truth is universal. I always think that's so crazy about monotheistic religions. If you belong to a religion that believes there is one God, then that means that all monotheistic religions are worshiping the same God. If they all agree there's only one, I mean, I often say it's like gravity. I don't care if you call it gravity or stick to the groundedness. Whatever you call it, it's still that one force. So if we all are followers of a one God, then we have to agree that we're following the same God. Now, there might be some debate on the tenets of that God or that creator, but in essence, if we first come to that realization that if there's only one God, we're worshiping the same God, then I think that kind of paves the road for to be a greater understanding in a place where we can reach some form of agreement.
Well, I think you've kind of nailed it on the head, right? If you boil it down, the essence of it is reverence for life.
Yes.
Right? It's that universal truth of we all matter.
Yes.
Right. And I think that that's kind of what Yusuf Karsh has been able to really capture in all of these photographs is the fact that we all matter. They matter. And why do they matter? Because they did X, Y, and Z to help everyone, right?
Right.
So the last one we're going to talk about is Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
And
Mandela.
And I think this photograph to me is so indicative of his nature, right? I mean, no matter what people threw at him, no matter what he went through, he kept composed.
Yes.
Right. And that's what I see when I see this photograph, is I see his composure. And I think the way you phrased it was dapper, right? I think that's
Yep.
the words that you used.
Yeah,
And
he's very dapper. I always liked that about him, Nelson Mandela. But he was just indomitable. The man spent all those years in prison, and yet he was able to come out smiling, dapper. His spirit was never broken. I don't want to speak unkindly of anybody, but I remember a few years ago when Paris Hilton went to jail. I mean, they had to release her after a few hours because she was just nutting up in jail. I think the thread count on the sheets on her cot was she couldn't take it, But yet here this man was in jail for 40 something years, and it never broke him. It never broke him. He was always able to transport himself away from that cell. I don't know how he did it, whether it was through reading books constantly or just having the equanimity to transport himself to another place mentally and spiritually. It worked, because that's a man that you would never think he had been in jail all those years. And so Nelson Mandela is somebody that I have always admired, always, and rightfully so. I think that he was given a place of preeminence and authority on almost every country he went, because when you hear his story, you can't help but it just pointed out just the irrepressible nature of a human spirit. I mean, you can lock me up, but you're not going to break me, and that's implacable. That's like the Rock of Gibraltar right there. So yeah, I love Nelson Mandela.
I think that's an interesting choice of words, right? You can lock me up, but you're not going to break me. And I feel like that's kind of the attitude or essence that I'm getting from this photograph. It's like, yes, I went through all these trials and tribulations, and I had all these hard times, but I'm still here. I'm doing what I set out to do 40 years ago before I was jailed, and I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to work towards, making this world a better place and making South Africa a better place. And to me, it's just, this photograph just says all of that, right? And it's amazing, astounding, mind-blowing to me that we can get all of those feelings and all of those thoughts and connotations just from one photograph.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the thing that was so impressive to me about Nelson Mandela is that after all those things his captors did to him and locking him up all those years, when he got out of prison and became the leader of his country, he said, I'm not going to do them the way they did me. And we can't turn around. We've got to have the ability to work in tandem with our former oppressors to make a better South Africa. And a lot of people would have tried to exact retribution and revenge, and he did not. He did not give in to those baser elements of the human nature. He instead embraced the higher elements of human nature: forgiveness, understanding, equanimity, and the willingness to reach out and work with people who did not do the same for you, and that's in one of those cases, he chose to do them the way he would have wanted them to do him, not the way they did him, which I'm sure that had to be a tough proposition. I mean, and nowadays there are some people who would say, well, man, you're just being a sucker. No, it takes much more to be a person who quietly reaches out in friendship. For us, two people that I came to know really well over the last 10, 15 years were the Gratzes. And I used to, when I was growing up, I always thought I was as a young man, I was much more a proponent of Malcolm X's ideology than I was Martin Luther King's, because I was like, man, somebody cracking me over the head with a hammer, I'm going to fight back. But as I got older, and even getting to know somebody like Bob Gratz, I started calling him the gentle lion. The dude was incredible for the way seeing him when I was growing up. We used to go down back then. Rosa Parks was called Cleveland Avenue, and we used to ride up and down Cleveland Avenue a lot. And I used to see the Gratches in their home with their family, and he was the only white pastor with a predominantly black church. And I always looked at him from a distance and thought, God, what's up with that guy? What kind of person is that? What is he in it for? And those kind of things. And then to come to know both he and his beautiful wife Jeannie in the latter stages of their life, and to be able to absorb just this feeling of unconditional love that emanated from both of them. It was inspiring. It was humbling. It was an educational moment, and it had a profound effect on me. And people like Nelson Mandela and people like Bob Gratz and so many people who have stood on the front lines of all social movements, and social activism. They're ordinary people, but they do extraordinary things, and he certainly fits that bill. And that's what I think is so moving about this exhibition, is that even some of the other people that you don't focus on tonight, I mean, whether it be through their music or whether it be through their, like Muhammad Ali, they were just, it goes to show that the 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 more admirable qualities of humanity are the ones we should all seek to emulate. And if we all did that, the world would be a much better place.
I completely agree with you, Bill. And I just want to invite everyone out to our museum and to this exhibition to come and view it. It's up through the end of this month, so there's a few more days. We're getting ready to turn it over into our new outdoor exhibition, which will deal with it's a partnership between us and Alabama Shakespeare Festival, dealing with Shakespearean images. And so I think it's going to be a really, really great exhibition, another outdoor exhibition. But please, please, please come and view Voices of Change. If you have not seen it yet, it is definitely worth the trip. And, weather is looking up, it's getting nicer, so we can be out.
You'll be able to pull your shoes off. You'll be able to pull your shoes off.
I think it was like 74, 75.
Yes.
Today,
yes.
so,
Yeah.
It's nice out. It's a nice little walk to take, and in this day and age when we're all sitting at our computers viewing programs like this, it's nice to be able to get out in the world and kind of connect back with things that we used to do. And I think that this is a great way for us to do that. So I just want to thank everyone for watching tonight, and Bill, for you being on here talking to us about this exhibition.
And thank you for having me. Hey, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, and so I just want to invite everybody out, not only to see the exhibition, but also to our next creative conversation. It's Creative Conversations, The History of Lynching. And this one is going to be Wednesday, March 24th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, Facebook Live, just like this one is. And on that one, we're going to have the artist Bethany Collins, Dr. Darren Moten, who is the chair of the History and Political Science Department at Alabama State University, Kiera Boone, who is the Deputy Director of EJI for their community engagement, and Dr. Joan Harrell, who is a lecturer, and she deals with diversity over at Auburn University. And so this is going to be a really great panel, and we're going to talk about a really not only Bethany's work that's currently up in our gallery space, but we're also going to talk about lynching in a more broad sense, and why is it important for artists to talk about it, and how does Bethany talk about it in her work, and how does EJI approach it in their work. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting, timely, important conversation. So again, I invite all of you to come out to the museum and view Voices of Change, and to join us next month for our next Creative Conversations, The History of Lynching. And again, thank you all for joining us tonight and for being here with us. We greatly appreciate it. Have a great night.